Good evening, everyone. Welcome to A World Awakening. I'm so happy to have my partner from Soul School, Jeff Turner, with me for the 2-hour show tonight. Anybody out there who knows me knows that one of the most important tenets of my life is speaking the truth, approaching everything, no matter how difficult, with honesty and authenticity and sincerity. It is who I am. It is how I am. It is how I always have been and always will be. That said, this show tonight will be entirely different and I think a lot deeper than it would have been even in its best incarnation had we done what we had originally intended to do. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, a very good friend of mine sent me a copy of a letter that was purportedly one of the letters that was written by Albert Einstein and that was released a couple of decades after his death or longer, with the express request that what he wrote not be released into the world until the world was ready for it. I read the letter. It made me so emotional. I couldn't actually read it aloud. I did a special show a couple of weeks ago with my friend Rupert Guy about this in a Zoom session with some of his followers and my own. And with sincerity, we read the letter and we discussed it and its implications, its ramifications, how it resonated with us. Because when I hear truth, it speaks to my soul and I feel it like it's visceral. And it did. And with complete sincerity, we talked about this as if this was the product of one of the greatest minds of our time or any time. Whoever wrote this letter felt some need to attach his name to it, perhaps for notoriety, to get some attention, that people would look at it and read it, and maybe its words would resonate with them. And having been a student and a big fan of Walter Isaacson, who is one of our greatest historians, many years ago, I immersed myself in Einstein by Walter Isaacson, which was his biography. And so I knew things about his life. The assertion being made that this was a letter written to his daughter, Liesl, who was a product of his first marriage, but was born out of wedlock and apparently grew up with her aunt under a pseudonym. And so there was an estrangement there. So when I read that part of the letter, that really touched my heart because I felt it, very deeply and very emotionally, that in the hopes that she had read those words and that it helped her heal. Well, yesterday Jeff contacted me. And Jeff, I'll keep this to a minimum because I know you are busting to just, I know. Jeff contacted me and said, "Oh God, Annie, I so hate to tell you this. I should have done my own homework on it. I should never have made an assumption that it was indeed authentic, that there was nothing fraudulent about it. I wanted to believe." You know the phrase, I want to believe. That's how I felt, because what was in that letter validated everything that I have been putting out into the world for decades. And so I developed an emotional attachment, and I had to ask myself difficult questions, probably the most difficult among them. Why is this happening? I mean, I got so discouraged, so disillusioned, so dispirited, so, I filled with despair, which is DES, not DIS, but all the disses. I had all the disses yesterday, and I had to ask myself, why am I reacting this way? Why am I so ready to throw my hands up in the air and cancel the show, maybe cancel everything, maybe walk away, and just focus all my attention on my mother? Are the lights in my room acting very strange, or is it just me that sees this?
I have not noticed it, but
Light going on, like a pulsating light. Maybe somebody else sees it, I don't know. But, if it's our galactic family, they can stop that now. But, I had to really think this through. And in fact, late last night, I told Jeff, I need to sleep on this. But I barely slept. I was just so put off and so disheartened by this experience. And I needed to understand why it hit me that way. We're living in an age of disinformation, misinformation, lies, deceit, fraud. It's all around us. And in just one vector and sector, we're dealing with people who, in the age of global communication, willful ignorance is a choice. But I felt defeated by the lies. I felt, and I understand. It hit me hard because those words had really resonated with me, and I wanted them to be his. I wanted that intent to be his because I admire him so much for the work he's done. And I asked myself, gravity is the law. Okay. That's the law. There's this thing called gravity. It holds all of us on the earth as we spin through the cosmos. Is E equals MC squared a constant truth that has revealed itself through this brilliant mathematical genius? So far, it's holding. So far, it makes sense scientifically. Everybody's using it as a template for everything else. Okay. So what does the theory of relativity have in common with something that has been written that is truth relative? And I think not. I think truth is absolute truth, regardless of where it generates from. And so, Jeff, I want you to pick up from here, and I'll hop in. I have notes. I have a notepad and everything.
Yeah.
And I want you to read the letter when you're done speaking about this.
Okay. Yeah.
And see if it resonates with others.
Yeah. Can you send me the cop? I'll look it up. I didn't have it pulled up, but I will.
Oh, I'm sorry, dude. You are so fucking fired. Oh my God.
No. Bill, I did have it pulled up, but I wasn't
down from the screen. I can't believe you ate the whole thing. Hold on.
Okay.
Oh, my friend Jennifer's checked into her hotel. Yay. Okay, let me put a smiley face on it. Okay, that's done. All right, now I will send you the letter. I can't read it.
Okay.
I can't. Oh, I will get the letter and put it in. Okay, is that? Oh, that's Erin. Okay.
Yeah, I did have it pulled up. I just wasn't sure if we were. I didn't know exactly how we were going to go, so I didn't have it in my notes tonight.
Oh, okay. But, all right. Okay. Well, then you are immediately rehired.
Thank you.
Immediately. You still don't get paid though.
Okay. Man, I needed some new shoes this week. Okay. Okay.
There it is. It's right there on the screen. There's some of it anyway.
Yeah. So I had not actually read the letter until I saw it shared on Facebook around New Year's ish, and then I didn't read it, and then you sent it to me, and then I read it, and I was and it was beautiful. It was gorgeous. It contained all sorts of ideas that were deep, dense, intriguing, iconographic sort of imagery that you click on it and it unfolds a whole world to you, and was very, very blessed and encouraged by it. And then, for whatever reason, yesterday, just in studying and preparing a little bit for tonight, I just started reading a little bit more broadly on it and looked up some different articles on it and whatnot. And that's when I found, unfortunately, that it's widely considered to not have been actually authored by Einstein, and no one knows who it was written by or what the intention was behind it. But that it's pretty much across the board agreed upon that it wasn't written by him. And it really hurt my heart when I saw it for a couple of reasons. One being it was incredible, and the ideas contained in the letter are incredible. And to have a mind like his, and to have those words come from a mind like his, someone with the scientific credibility that he had, those kind of things are just always extra affirming, and so I've had that happen to me numerous times throughout my life and my career as a writer, as a speaker, as a pastor, where there was some bit of anecdotal evidence I wanted to share in a sermon, or I wanted to share in a talk or in a book, and upon further investigation found out, oh, it's either misattributed or it's not, it's considered apocryphal, or we don't know who actually wrote it, and that happens. But and I hesitated to share it for a moment because I know how important it had been to you, and I knew it was the basis of the show tonight. But as you said,
truth is more important.
Exactly. In all things, we want to be truthful. And my honest belief is that as a result of this, something more beautiful came about as a result of us finding this out than would have come out just by us talking about the letter itself.
I agree.
And that is my view on it. Here's my view on it. And so I'm a big fan of the philosophy of the French philosopher Paul Ricoeur. It's helped me immensely over the years, especially for those of you who don't maybe know my story. I don't know who watches or how often you watch, or if there's anyone new watching. But I was a pastor for over a decade, well over a decade. And I had been involved in ministry longer than that. And during the course of my years as a pastor, I lost my faith. I became an atheist for a season. I won't go into all that. I've talked about it at length. I have a book on Amazon called The Atheistic Theist, where I go into a little bit more if you would like to read that. It'll help me get the shoes that I was going to get, since I'm not getting paid for the show tonight. Just kidding.
Or for any of them, for that matter. So,
Yeah, you know what? This is true.
No, fun.
This is true. We do this because we love you guys, and we enjoy it. We enjoy the hell out of it. And but I came to a point where I stopped believing the way that I once believed, and it was very traumatizing. It was very devastating, because this is something I based my entire life on. Yeah. It wasn't just the basis of my career as a pastor. It was how I lived my life. I mean, my entire life in secret was lived in accordance with a book, with a faith, with a set of beliefs that I had found I found myself unable to believe anymore. I was doubting not only the veracity of Scripture itself, I was doubting the existence of God and all sorts of things. And God, that's hard, And Nietzsche, in Beyond Good and Evil, I believe, says that when that belief essentially is shaken in you, when you have the truest thing, that the thing that you think is the very basis of reality itself pulled out from underneath you, it gives rise to the suspicion that every lesser thing is also up for debate. And so everything in your life kind of goes from solid to liquid, and you're not sure about anything, because here's this one thing this thing you were sure was the very ground of being itself, right? And when the ground of being disappears, well, every little epiphenomenal being that emerged as a result of that greater being comes into question as well. And so that's kind of where I found myself. And so the work of a philosopher like Paul Ricoeur, among many others, was incredibly helpful to me. And Paul Ricoeur is a philosopher who talks about something called a second naivete. And he does his philosophizing in the context of a cadre of individuals he refers to as the masters of suspicion. And these masters of suspicion, according to him, are Freud, Marx, and Nietzsche. Sigmund Freud, Karl Marx, and Friedrich Nietzsche. And he says that the philosophy of these three individuals have so, I don't want to say infected, because that makes it sound very negative. And Ricord didn't actually speak of their philosophy negatively. He actually saw it as a positive thing. But it's airborne. Like, you don't have to know Freud, Marx, or Nietzsche. You don't have to have read any of their works to have been affected by their ideas.
Right.
They're airborne. It's in the air. We're all partakers of these ideas now. We are all suspicious of the traditions that were handed to us, right? The traditions that at least Western society was based upon. Freud kind of had the notion that everything is kind of a repressed sexual desire. There's a lot of issues with mother, father, all that kind of stuff. For Marx, everything was a power struggle and a class struggle. There was kind of a financial aspect beneath everything. And for Nietzsche, everything was about power and resentment and what he, and that's kind of what boiled under the surface. And so these three philosophers, according to Paul Ricoeur, caused us to be suspicious of our traditions in ways that we wouldn't have otherwise been suspicious of them. And so now every time we hear religion, we're like, is that what's going on there? When you hear a preacher preach, oh, is this just a manifestation of some repressed, weird sexual thing this guy's got going on? Is he just after my money? Is this just a power grab? You know what I'm saying? We're now suspicious of our traditions because of the philosophies of these individuals. And so he said, nothing serious can be said about religion from here on out without taking into serious consideration these suspicions, right? And the others that they gave birth to. I think I've heard it suggested as well that Darwin should probably have been on that list, right? And probably several others. But the idea was, so Ricoeur's project is like, okay, how do we reapproach the sacred, right? How do we reapproach that which has given us meaning for millennia in the light of and in the context of these suspicions that we all now have about the things that once gave our lives meaning? And he's like, well, the first thing you have to do is you have to let these suspicions do their work. You have to become suspicious of the things that once gave you meaning, and you have to have them kind of fall apart on you. And they don't fall apart for everyone the same way, because we don't all take them as seriously as others do. So for me, my whole life was based on my Christian faith to the point that my career was attached to it. Everything was. For some, it's more of a casual observation, but it still is like that which tethers you to like a being, right? And so to lose it, it's damn traumatic, right? And so, but you have to let the suspicions do their work, and then you lose it. And it's kind of like losing the wonder of childhood. You stop believing in fairies. You stop believing in, you stop believing in angels. You stop believing in ghosts. You stop believing in all the things that made childhood magical. You stop believing in Santa Claus once you wake up in the middle of the night and see your parents in the living room instead of a jolly gift giver from the north. You stop believing in the Easter Bunny once you whatever. It's kind of like the death and the end of childhood, like that loss of religion. It's similar to that as far as civilization is concerned. But there's something amazing that happens.
What's that? I still believe in Santa and the Easter Bunny and all
I do too. In fact, I believe in it way more now than I ever did.
When I was a kid, yeah.
And that's what happens next, because once you let those criticisms, those suspicions do their work, they dismantle the literal interpretation of things, right? They dismantle literalism. And literalism is a curse. I really believe that. I think that literalism is like the bane of my existence. Whether it's a fundamentalist literalist Christian or a fundamentalist literalist atheist, I think they're both kind of, they are definitely cut from the same cloth, because they both commit egregious category errors in how they approach the spiritual and the numinous, because they're both approaching it in this post-enlightenment way, where, see, what happened was in the Enlightenment, everything became about science and literalism and rationality and that's great. It's wonderful. Look at all that it's given us, right? We now know, wash your hands. You don't get sick as often. It's a great thing to know, but
don't
like
your eyes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's great. Thank God we're all alive because of the Enlightenment in a lot of ways. But it did something to the way that we think, right? Because it really stole from us. And I don't want to say stole. It's not negative. It was like a necessary part of the development of the human psyche, right? If you see the human timeline as like a being that's growing up and maturing, the Enlightenment was something like those teenage years and those years where you question authority and question your parents' beliefs, and you kind of learn to think on your own. And that's kind of what the Enlightenment did. It taught us to like question the way that our ancestors thought about things. But we talk about our ancestors, our ancient forebears, like they were stupid people, And when I hear my blessed, wonderful atheist friends talk about, let's say, the book of Genesis, they're like, oh, really? A talking snake told, two naked people to pluck a piece of produce, and that's what's sending people to hell. And it's like, yeah, well, when you say it like that, that sounds pretty goddamn stupid. But that isn't the way that any ancient person would have read that text, because they weren't thinking literally. We kind of forget that the way we think is really new, right? Even in terms of thinking in terms of psychology is a baby, Psychology is like a baby in terms of ideas and, 100-something years old, so nobody 300-400 years ago was thinking like, okay, now the psychological significance of that is they didn't think like that. Yet they were still communicating psychological truths, but they didn't know to speak of it as psychology.
And they had no vernacular for it.
And they didn't. And so what did they do? They thought and they taught in myth and in story. And there was a subtlety to them where it's not like in your face in a lot of these myths, but the truths are there. And that's why there is a universal pattern in all myths and stories that you can find. That's why Joseph Campbell can write A Hero with 1,000 Faces, and it's absolutely true. Because the quote, hero in every myth is the same person. It's the everyman in a different mask. That's why Finnegan's Wake, the character's name is HEC, here, or HCE, here comes everyone. It's a story about, this universal story that we all inhabit, right? And so
Catcher in the Rye is another example.
Yes.
J.D. Salinger's masterpiece.
Yep. And again, Ulysses by Joyce, same thing. It's one thing, but it's actually this grander story being told in this
moment. And really everything else.
Yeah. And so that's
all embedded within the context.
Absolutely. But even then, those are stories that are aware of the pattern, because those are stories that were written by people who understood now that the pattern is there. And so they're making it a little bit more explicit.
And literally manipulating it. Yes.
Right. And making it more, they're bringing it to the surface so we can now sit and see it. Whereas our ancient forebears, they knew truths that they were trying to communicate, but the delivery system for these truths were, certain mythological tropes and ideas, but they weren't explicit because that wasn't the way they were attempting to communicate it. And so there was a certain subtle, seductive element to their stories that made them so impactful and universal.
And mysterious.
They were, it's kind of like in like the actual like quote art of seduction, right? There's a certain subtlety that's necessary. If you're too obvious about what you're doing, somebody's going to catch on, right? Like whether it's a male, female, whatever, if you you just drench yourself in cologne and you get your hair all greased back and your, gold chains everywhere, somebody's going to be like, what is this guy trying to do over here?
You know what I mean? He's Elvis, for Christ's sake.
Or if you're super painted up or whatever, and somebody's like, what's going on over here? But there's a subtlety to it where you're like, I'm not really conscious of what's going on, but I'm registering under the surface that's something going on, and that's the power of the myths that we've been handed. There's a subtlety to them. There's truth embedded in them that's not being purposely shoved down your throat. It's just there because this is how these things were communicated. Post-Enlightenment, we think of everything in literal terms. And so we look at the story of Genesis, let's just say for an example, because everybody knows it. And we're like, hold on, this is nonsense. The entire human race comes from two people, so we're all just the product of inbreeding. How would that have worked? And a snake told them to eat an apple, and God put a tree in the garden that if they ate from it, it would cause people to be damned to hell for eternity. And while we're on it, if that was the truth, why didn't God tell them that eating the apple would send them to hell and not just lead to death? Because you think that would be an important detail to let them in on. And so when
Yeah.
and it's all and it and it's all true. That's all. It's a proper critique, but it's a proper critique of an interpretation of, in this case, Christianity, that emerged as a result of the same Enlightenment thinking that comes back to critique it. Because post Enlightenment Christians, and it is mostly a Christian phenomenon, because the Enlightenment kind of is a Western phenomenon in a lot of ways, and that was mainly the religion it went after. Not so much these days, but at that time it was. And so the response was, okay, well, we have to make our religion Enlightenment friendly. So there's all these talks of like, well, how can you prove Genesis scientifically? Well, you can't, dumbass. I'm sorry. It's like, but no, you can't, because that's not the point of the story. I'm so sorry to be so crass, but like, these are the things that just bother me so deeply. And they bother me so deeply because they were a part of my life growing up, and they ruined me. It really ruined me, because that's how I thought you had to interpret these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to a point where I realized that doesn't work. That doesn't work. The Earth's not 6,000 years old. Are you kidding me? We wouldn't be able to see half the stars in the sky if the Earth was 6,000 years old. Our phones wouldn't work if the Earth was only 6,000 years old. Light has to travel a certain, it's like, of course that's not literal. Of course the story of Noah's flood isn't literal. Of course these things aren't being told to us as literal history. But that's how I was raised to think of them. And when I realized it doesn't work, well, it fell apart on me. But it fell apart on me in a way that was devastating, because I had invested. This was the thing that gave my life meaning and value. And so it did what Paul Ricoeur's Masters of Suspicion did to humanity corporately. It took that naivete away from me. It stole the enchantment of childhood, spiritually speaking, from me. And all of a sudden I found myself in a world that, as far as I could tell, was devoid of the divine. Because the only way that the divine could be real is if it existed in agreement with the stories that I grew up believing. But the stories I grew up believing can't be true, because literally speaking, they didn't happen. But that's when this miracle occurs that Paul Ricoeur also talks about, which is the second naivete, right? Where we are able to return to something that we lost, but not as a naive child, right? As one that's been through the ringer, as one who's seen, the complexities of things, as one who has seen the inner workings and is familiar, maybe not literally familiar with Freud, Marx, and Nietzsche, but you're at least familiar with the mindset, because it's airborne, and you've critiqued it in alignment and in the context of those thoughts, and you've seen, oh yeah, I see exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, you're right. And yet still, Paul Ricoeur says elsewhere, beyond the desert of criticism, we wish to be called. That you get to the end of that critical way of seeing things, and you still feel this call to leave the desert of criticism. And that's when you enter into this place of a second naivete. Now, we said, I believe in Santa Claus. I believe in Santa Claus now more than I ever believed in Santa Claus as a child. And that's because every December 24th, and the days and weeks leading up to it, I literally feel myself affected by the presence of a long dead Turkish bishop whose generosity left a meteoric imprint in the collective conscious of humanity that visits us once a year and inspires us to generosity. And I am able to embody that archetype and become a physical embodiment of that spirit.
Living manifestation of the spirit.
Exactly. Yes. And so to me, it's more real than it ever was before. Nobody can tell me that's not real, because it's like, dude, I lived it out. I embodied it. You can't tell me it's not real. You can bring up all the, well, how's it possible for one man to, and it's like, do you know how dumb that sounds when you're talking to, when you're talking to someone on the other side of it who's talking about, no, I'm talking about the joy on my children's faces. I'm talking about the joy on my wife's face. I'm talking about the joy on a stranger's face when I'm able to bless them as a result of, being affected by this spirit of generosity that really erupts within us in this particular season. It's like, what a dumb argument. Or people are like, well, it's just stolen from pagans and blah, blah, blah. It's like, Yeah, much like everything else,
Yeah.
we're all borrowing ideas from each other. And we're all working on them and
It
tweaking
is
them.
all part of the collective consciousness,
It's how
the
we
unified
grow,
field of
right?
consciousness.
Exactly. And that's how we grow. That's how we bring the disunity that erupted from a singularity back into a singularity by finding things that we're separated from as a result of that scattering, and we bring those fragments together and we learn and we come back into oneness. And anyways, this is a very long way of trying to set up the point that the same thing happened to me with faith, right? With in my case, Christianity, right? I still consider myself a Christian, but if you were to compare me to who I was
Mhm.
15 years ago, I mean, I would be a complete heretic. I'd be a complete, as far as my practice, my internal way of thinking and seeing things, but I completely consider myself that. And other people would not, would like to take that title from me, but I don't care because of what I've been through and how I've been able to process. I'm in a place of second naivete in my life when it comes to this, where, look, I understand how to apply the historical critical method to the reading of scripture. I understand source criticism. I understand, that of the 13 Pauline epistles, only like half of them are considered to have been actually written by the apostle Paul, and yet the epistle of Ephesians, which is considered pseudo-Pauline, not written by Paul by mainstream scholarship, is one of my favorite epistles. But it's written in the name of Paul, likely by a disciple of Paul, or someone who was trying to communicate some of Paul's ideas. And so in the ancient world, that was called the pseudepigrapha. It's written under a false name, but it's not written with bad or evil intentions, right? It's written because there's a powerful idea that wants to be communicated. And so they would use a name that would lend credibility.
Vessel, it's considered channeling.
Yeah. And you know what? Exactly. And I had the thought today too. I think a lot of, modern channelers, however one wants to frame it or think of it, really are doing the same thing sometimes, whether consciously or unconsciously. And other times there's something else passing through them. But sometimes, I believe this too, that I think sometimes people have a deeper wisdom than they know they have. And sometimes slipping into a different persona allows them to communicate that truth in a way that they wouldn't have been able to communicate it if they were just being viewed as who they were. And sometimes I think, channeling, quote unquote, is almost as simple as that, or it's one way that it manifests and functions. So anyways, all of that to say, something about second naivete is you're able to return and approach something through the lens of complexity now, not with, naive naivete, but with an educated naivete. It's like Marie-Louise von Franz. It's one of my favorite quotes that it's one thing to be a cynical, or it's one thing to be a naive idealist. It's another thing to be a cynical realist. It's another thing entirely to have no delusions left and yet still hold the inner flame, right? Wendell Berry, one of my favorite poets, and I don't remember the name of the poem, but he wrote something like, "Today, practice something impossible. Practice resurrection, despite the fact that you know all the facts, right? Despite the fact that you know better, practice resurrection, right?" So, and it's beautiful. And that's what a second naivete is. It's where you reconnect with the ancient mind, the mind that our ancient forebears, pre-enlightenment forebears had, where things didn't have to be line upon line fact, in that rational way of looking at things. They understood a world of symbols. They understood a world of archetypes, even though they did not know those words. They understood that. They understood how to feel pattern and rhythm in reality itself without knowing what to call it. And second naivete is a way of plugging back into that ancient mind. And a couple of weeks ago, we talked about a re-enchanted world.
Yeah, walking through the back door of the Garden of Eden.
Exactly, which is another Ricourian concept where you leave Eden through the front gate, and then you circle the globe, feeling like an exile, feeling like you'll never return, and then you come upon the back door, and you enter Eden again from an angle you never entered into it before. And because you're entering from a new angle, it looks like a new place, but it also is a new place because you've been transformed while in exile. And so now you come back to something that you thought you could never return to, but you're not naive anymore because you've seen the world. You've left the gates of Eden and now return a new person. It's also like the prodigal son story. Everybody talks about the story of the prodigal son. A father has two sons. One is kind of faithful and loyal and always sticks around the house, and then the other demands his inheritance and leaves and spends his inheritance on wine, women, and song, right? And ends up in the pig pen. And eventually he comes to himself, which I love the language there, that he comes to himself. He remembered who he was, right? When he's in the pig pen, he comes face to face with himself and he realizes, this is not who I am. And so he returns home. His father greets him, embraces him. And actually the moral of the story doesn't end up being, look at how bad this kid was and his father still welcomed him back. The moral of the story ends up being that the older brother chastises the father for welcoming him back with open arms. And the father's like, you're missing the point, bro. I guess son in this case. And then he relates that to the religious leaders of the day who didn't understand why Jesus fellowshiped with the people he fellowshiped with. So even here, the good guy in the story is the kid who left and then returned, right? The one who's almost the quote unquote villain is the one who didn't leave. Meaning that...
Yeah, the perfect one. The devotional one.
Exactly.
Of the ring one.
Yep. To really become who you are, you have to leave and return. And for some, it'll be more dramatic. For some, it'll be less dramatic because of maybe the weight you put on the thing that you leave. But there is that leaving of naivete, the complexity that comes as a result of exile and wandering.
And the maturity.
The maturity. And then when you return, there's perspective. There's something that you're not naive about the way the world works anymore. And then there is an acceptance of what is in this thing that you wanted to leave, even though it's not what you thought it was. There's an acceptance of it now as a result of what you've experienced. And so with me, like I said, I understand, I don't want to sound arrogant. I understand how to read scripture. I understand how to exegete a text. I understand source criticism. I understand, I understand how to look at it and break it down and look at what was probably going on and what wasn't going on and why this was being said.
Yeah, but you scrutinize it now. You just not like when you were a child, when you read it and took it word for word, literally, this was the lesson, this is how to live, so on.
Yeah.
Now you read it, same words with different eyes.
Yeah.
And you scrutinize it and you pull it apart as this delicate tapestry that you weave back together again.
Right.
And it creates a different picture than the one you saw as a child and a young man.
Yes. And that tearing apart of it and seeing, it doesn't function exactly the way that I thought it functioned. Oh, there's only one other place in the entire, canon of human literature where the word stoicheia to cosmos is used, and it's in 4QMMT from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that's what Paul meant. And I'm sorry, I'm just throwing stuff out there to show you that this stuff is complex, and then it stuff falls apart on you. And then I've learned to read it like that critically. But then there's this part of me, this child in me that, like Paul Ricoeur says, longs to return from the desert of criticism, to find something else. And so sometimes I just will open it up and it'll be something that I know doesn't mean how I'm taking it, but it'll hit me. And I know this might not have been written by the Apostle Paul, for example, but it doesn't change the truth of what's being said. And I even went through a season when I was an atheist where I put myself through a thought experiment, and I know that I'm stranger than most, but I put myself through a thought experiment where I listened to a lot of the mythicists, right? These are people who aren't just atheists, but they believe that the historical figure of Jesus was a myth, that the actual human figure of Jesus didn't exist. And a lot of the scholarship around this is really bonkers, and it's bothersome to people who read a lot. But there's some in that field that are pretty good. There's a guy named Richard Carrier who's among the smarter of the mythicists, even though he's not a perfect human being. Another guy named Robert M. Price who's got some interesting thoughts as well. I kind of like the way he thinks. But I put myself through a thought experiment where I was like, okay, what if Jesus was a mythical figure? What if we're not just dealing with the fact that maybe God doesn't exist? Now, again, this is what I'm going through as I'm deconstructing my.
Christopher Hitchens
Yeah.
spoke to this, and God is not great.
Yeah. And so I'm like, what if he wasn't? Would there be anything of value still there? And after a long time of thinking through this and really trying to like convince myself to live as though that we're true, I kept finding myself coming back and living according to the values of the Sermon on the Mount, and I would still come back to it. And I'm like, but wait a minute, I'm trying to put myself to this thought experiment where maybe the person who I'm saying said this didn't even exist. And I found myself in the place of the character Puddleglum from The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis, who said, even if Aslan didn't exist, I would still live as a Narnian. He's like, because that's just a better way of being. And that's kind of where and that's just kind of where I found myself. And that's relative to my experience, and for someone else, it might be a different path or tradition. But for me, that's what it was. And I came to this place of re-embracing what I lost. And it was from this more mystical point of view where I don't need it to be literal. I don't need it to be literal history. Do I believe the physical person Jesus existed? Yes, I do. Do I believe that the Gospels, the way that they're written the way that a documentarian would write things down? No, absolutely not. Because they contradict one another. They have the same stories in them.
Tribes, different times. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're written by specific people to specific communities going through specific things, using the same stories to speak to them where they're at.
As parables, often as
Absolutely.
as the whole notion of planting the seed of faith. And so many of the stories that have been documented that are supposed to bring us back to faith, to our moral compass, true north, to bring us to a place of comfort where we can accept, acknowledge, and live by these laws, these rules that are established.
Yeah.
And some of them, particularly in the Bible, are so arcane that they are laughable.
Yes.
And yet, the originalists will say, well, I strictly follow the Bible. And my question is, which version?
Right.
There are 17 different versions of the Bible circulating around this globe right now. 17.
And we don't know how to read it anyways. Like, even people.
Yeah. So which one do you follow the letter?
Right. Well, people who are like, I read it in the original language. It's like, I know linguists who will tell you the Hebrew is what's called an abjad text, which means there are no vowels.
Right.
So we are in a lot of places guessing what's said, and it's probably what makes the most sense. But like, to say you're following it exactly, it's just bonkers, man. And that's why Paul says, and this is actually from one of the epistles that's considered genuine, he says that the letter kills, but the spirit gives life, right? So taking something in that literal way will always kill. It'll kill your spirit. It'll lead you to kill another's. It'll lead you to literally kill in some instances. It's the spirit of the thing that gives life, right? And so the aim and the goal of deconstruction, or even Ricoeur's Masters of Suspicion, is to smash the letter, to smash the form in which the spirit is encased, and let the spirit of that thing be liberated, right? Because there is a spirit that's inside all texts. And that's really kind of what Derridian deconstruction was about. And I'm no expert in Jacques Derrida or the thinking of Derrida, but deconstruction and deconstructionism is a literary method. It's a way of approaching a text in which you're taking the text apart and showing that there can be multiple meanings. And, in one sense, I think it's really, it's the attempt at liberating the spirit of a text to get at the heart of what was trying to be said, and realizing that it can take many different forms. It's mercurial in a lot of ways, but at the heart, there is a spirit, right? And so that's why when I'm talking about second naivete, it's what we come back to the point where it's like, doesn't matter whether this was written by this person. Doesn't even matter if Jesus existed as a literal person. Doesn't matter if the Buddha existed as a literal person. Doesn't matter if any of these figures existed as literal people in history. What matters is the spirit that flows to us through these archetypal figures. That's what matters. And
one of the things that I've struggled with, and I believe it was in the year 2000, I became an ordained minister. And yet I still struggle with everything having to do with religion, with everything from every religion, and have been frequently quoted as having said, I think that organized religion is the scourge of the earth, that more people have died in the name of God or Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad or, any of the prophets than have died, by disease. I mean, it's just, I think that we need to somehow rise above it. It's why I love the song Imagine by John Lennon. Imagine no religion. It's easy if you try. Well, I've tried to imagine no religion and still be able to function as a minister, as a pastor, as a reverend, as whatever word you want to put on it, but predominantly as a grief counselor. That's why I made that leap of faith.
Yeah.
Because I am able to function in that capacity in a very meaningful way.
Yes.
And during COVID was called upon quite a bit to help people through their very personal, painful losses.
Yeah.
But I don't think that I even necessarily have to believe in God to do what I do.
Yeah.
And
yep.
So, I mean, my function, maybe I function on the periphery of, the purpose that I fulfill, the purpose that you fulfill in your evolution of thought. But I will tell you, you want to know the very fastest way to make Jehovah's Witnesses leave your driveway? Go to the door and tell them that you absolutely believe in Jesus Christ and you are quite certain that he was an extraterrestrial. Done. Gone.
That'll probably do it. No,
I guarantee you that it doesn't.
Yeah.
I've employed it for many years.
Yeah. I have somewhere in my suburb, there's a Jehovah's Witness couple, and I don't know where they live, but we get literature dropped off sometimes, but I think I'm blacklisted because they came to the house once. Yeah. They came to the house once and I was like, I love talking about this stuff. Okay, where should we start? And just started blathering on about theology. And they were like, you know what? Can I just leave this pamphlet with you? And I was like, yeah, sure. You can just leave this pamphlet.
Oh, yeah, sure. I got to have something to start the fireplace with tonight. Hey, they don't believe. Rule number 4, they don't believe in ghosts. Automatically, I'm out. I'm out.
Right. We stopped at a rest stop on the way we were taking a trip this summer, and there was some Jehovah's Witnesses there at the rest stop passing out literature. And there was a couple very sweet older ladies, and I really felt bad for them because everybody was just walking by and giving them a hard time. And I walked up and I took all their pamphlets and I was like, hey, you know what? Just want to say I appreciate your spirit and your heart out here for doing what you're doing and your passion. And, for the record, I think that Charles Taze Russell, who's the founder of most of the thinking, was just a brilliant, innovative thinker. And while I don't agree with him on all, fronts, just whatever. And they were like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Thank you. And they gave me a hug and sent me on my way. So you can also.
That's very sweet. I'm always very, very nice to them.
Yeah.
And oh my God. Oh my God. There are so many. I don't mean to come down on the Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't.
Oh, no, I don't either.
I disparage all religions equally. So it's not, I'm not singling them out.
Oh, no, I know. I think with religion, there's religion done right and there's clearly religion done wrong. And the word religion in Latin is re ligare, which means to bind together, to rebind. So that can obviously be done in a positive and a negative way. You can rebind someone to things that they no longer need to be bound to, right? Or you can become the very bondage itself. Or when religion's at its best, it is helping a person rebind together the disparate parts of their being, parts of themselves that have become shattered and scattered, right? And I kind of feel like remaining in the context that I've tried to remain in, that's kind of my mission. I once upon a time I prayed and I was like, what am I even called to do anymore? Because
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, how many times have you been fractured?
Yeah.
Yesterday I
Mhm.
was fractured,
Yeah.
and I still don't understand completely why it
Mhm.
hit me so hard,
Yeah.
but it did. And
Mhm.
you were with me when that happened. You got what was the first thing? Oh, hold on. Let me just pull this up. Okay. Let's just share this, Jeff, before you
Okay.
read the letter. Okay. Let's just share this. Jeff, why are you like 5 people down? What's going on here? This never happens. Okay. Oh my God. I sent, oh, jeez. And you were at work while I was offloading all of this crap on you. It's just,
Well, it's okay.
yeah. All right. Hold on. I got to share this, Jeff, because
Yeah.
I think people, it's part of the whole honesty trip.
Yeah.
You
And
know, it's,
people,
it's, this is how I processed this with you yesterday,
yeah.
right? Um, all right. Okay. And that was awesome. And okay, so this was your information that it is widely disputed. You sent me you sent me the Snopes website thing, and said you will defer to my wisdom and judgment on it. Also, the disputes themselves could be disputed. I'm not sure yet. I'll look into it some more. Typical research geek that you are. My response: okay, I'm going to kill myself now. It's been nice knowing you. I was only half kidding.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was so disheartened. I was so struck. And I had to ask, why
Mhm.
is this?
Mhm.
Why do I feel emotionally overwhelmed? Why do I feel bereft? Why do I feel robbed? Why do I feel duped? Why do I feel like some part of my essential innocence has just been robbed from me? I wanted to believe
Mhm.
so much. And, we have no proof that he wrote it. We also have no definitive proof that he didn't.
Yeah.
And you said you felt so bad about telling me and you were disappointed, stunned. It was a beautiful letter. How can we cover the very same subject? It's true regardless of who wrote it. That's what you
Mhm.
sent to me.
Mhm.
And that singular line is what shifted me,
Mhm.
what turned me away from. And then I said something about I can't kill myself. Everybody would be very upset, especially Peanut Buttercup. Um, but I did say, I hate this world and I don't belong here. I'm convinced I have been condemned to hell and this is it. I meant that. That's where I was emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. That's where I was.
Mm.
So I'm just sharing with our audience exactly what happened between the two of us.
Yeah.
And I went on, I suppose it is better to know than not know. But suddenly I understand why there are people who can't admit that a monster is, not their best friend. There are people in the world that just buy into the bullshit. It's just easier to say, I believe every word than
Mhm.
it is to confront it and to fact check it
Yeah.
and to condemn it. Misinformation, disinformation, lies in a world that seems flooded with fraud and
Mhm.
deception. Um, and you said you were very sorry that, I reacted the way that I did. I basically said, I have to sleep on this. Um, but love is real. And we know that everything said in that letter is reality. I read the Bible knowing that who is claimed to have written this book or that probably didn't, there is truth in it regardless. You exemplify and embody the reality that is hinted at in the words of that letter, which is why it resonated with me so much. Like my sternum was vibrating when I first read it. You live it, and that's proof enough to me that it's true. That meant so much to me, Jeff. It meant so much to me. And then I said, I can't find anything to kill myself with. We have steak knives, and stuff, but it's just what a bloody mess. I can't do that to my family. But yeah, I was shocked and stunned, and I wanted desperately to believe that he wrote it because I've invested so much intellectually into Albert Einstein. And that doesn't even mean that I understand. I look at his equations and that's all Greek to me. I don't know. I'm a mathematical idiot.
Right.
But, I've used his quotations, verified quotations in all of my books have something of Albert Einstein and his metamorphosis from being a man strictly of science and for all intents and purposes an atheist to later in his life coming to grips with his own faith that he didn't even know existed decades before. And then discovering it, confronting it, justifying it, and making it meld. The merging of science and spirituality. And he was the personification of that.
Yeah.
So that was why the letter, even though it was in a different style, a slightly different style than other things that I had read of his, I accepted it because I needed to accept it. I needed for it to be him so that I could admire it even more, so that I could consider that it was coming from someone I perceived to be an authority, one of the greatest minds of our time or any other. And so it was, in a way, attributing it to him made it more meaningful until you made me look at it a different way. And I appreciate that. And you go ahead and read the letter whenever you're ready.
Yeah. And just to say that that's the power of symbol, right?
Yeah.
That's the power of it, is that excuse me, that at the end of the day, while the specific avatar, whatever we want to call it, that truth seems to be coming through in a moment, might seem like the most important thing. It's the truth that's coming through it that's the most important thing.
Yes.
Right? And so whether something is pseudepigraphal or written by the person who it claims to have been written by, ultimately is not what matters. What matters is the truth that's coming forth. That's what matters. I shared a passage from the Bhagavad Gita with you the other night when we were kind of texting, and it just, I wrote it down, but it's like Lord Krishna explains that he comes as an avatar of God to take flesh in every age when he is needed. He says, my true being is unborn and changeless. I am the Lord who dwells in every creature. Through the power of my own Maya, I manifest myself in a finite form. And whenever Dharma declines and the purpose of life is forgotten, I manifest myself on earth. I'm born in every age to protect the good, to destroy evil, and to reestablish Dharma. So the principle is, that's what a symbol is.
Yeah.
That's what a symbol is. And it's the same truth that can come forth through these different symbolic entities and archetypes and beings. And in that, if you had, so here's the deal, that truth marked you. It left a brand mark on your soul. Yeah. It gave words to things that you felt that you may have still felt had you not heard it. But the words themselves are an organizing principle that took what may have just been a feeling and brought them together into something real that you could touch. It made your unconscious conscious in some ways, right?
Yeah.
Those words did that. Those
Yes.
words did that. And that's the power of the word, spoken word. That's
Yeah.
even in
Power of the written word, the language.
spoken word. Words take all the potentialities that are out there and collapse them into something that you can touch and see. And those words did that for you. And Einstein, whether it was him or not, was the archetypal figure that those words needed to find expression through for their meaning to land.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It sometimes, to me, it doesn't matter. And this is a weird, and I'm going to read the letter here in a minute. But I had a dream once years ago. I was trying to fix my dryer. I am not the most mechanically inclined person on the planet. I've learned over the years because I'm a homeowner. But in the early days of my family life, I was not very mechanically inclined. My dryer went on me. I didn't know what to do. Didn't have the money to fix it. I had no clue how the inner workings of this thing worked. So I go to bed that night. I have a dream that the sound technician from the church that I was a pastor at, who is extremely mechanically inclined. This was the guy who could fix anything. Literally, if it was broken, he could fix it.
Yeah.
If it was already fixed, he could make it better. So I have a dream where this person comes to me down in my laundry room, and he's like, "Oh, I see your dryer's broken." And I'm like, "Yes," and I don't know what to do. He touches the dryer, and the whole thing breaks into like 1,000 pieces, like an exploded view. He shows me how the damn thing works, how to fix it. I wake up, and I'm like, and I go downstairs, and I do what he told me in the dream, and it works. I did not know how to fix that dryer on my own. But the wisdom that I needed to fix it came to me in a dream, but it took the form of somebody whose mechanical prowess I would trust.
Mm-hmm.
If it had been someone else, I may have just been like, "Oh, that was just bad pizza or something,"
Yeah.
But because it came to me in that form, I listened.
Yeah.
And even this truth, because of your adoration for Einstein, it came to you. That was the delivery system. It came to you through. And to me, in some way, it's almost more beautiful, but because it means that truth was after you. That truth was trying to express itself to you so you could be expressed to yourself. And it took a form in this slice of time that would be the thing that caused you to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Which to me, God, I just love the way this stuff works. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
Anyways, we've been working on it for about an hour. So
Yeah.
maybe we should read the letter.
You're going to read it.
I'm going to
because
read
I
the letter.
can't get through it.
Okay.
And then we'll bring Erin in because.
And I was going to ask, do we want to do that now or afterwards? Okay.
No, let's read the letter first, and then we'll bring my lovely Erin in to. We've already talked about this today, so I know she's got a lot to contribute.
Okay, and I am reading through the text window here, so I should be able to get it all. Okay. Excuse me. When I proposed the theory of relativity, very few understood me, and what I will reveal now to transmit to mankind will also collide with the misunderstanding and prejudice in the world. I ask you to guard the letters as long as necessary, years, decades, until society is advanced enough to accept what I will explain below. There is an extremely powerful force that so far science has not found a formal explanation to. It is a force that includes and governs all others, and is even behind any phenomenon operating in the universe, and has not yet been identified by us. This universal force is love. When scientists looked for a unified theory of the universe, they forgot the most powerful unseen force. Love is light that enlightens those who give and receive it. Love is gravity because it makes some people feel attracted to others. Love is power because it multiplies the best that we have and allows humanity not to be extinguished in their blind selfishness. Love unfolds and reveals. I don't know if there's a missing piece there, but it's love unfolds and reveals. For love we will live and die. Love is God and God is love. This force explains everything and gives meaning to life. This is the variable that we have ignored for too long. Maybe because we are afraid of love, because it's the only energy in the universe that man has not learned to drive at will. To give his ability to love, I made a simple substitution in my most famous equation. If instead of E equals mc squared, we accept that the energy to heal the world can be obtained through love multiplied by the speed of light squared, we arrive at the conclusion that love is the most powerful force that there is because it has no limits. After the failure of humanity in the use and control of the other forces of the universe that have turned against us, it is urgent that we nourish ourselves with another kind of energy. If we want our species to survive, if we are to find meaning in life, if we want to save the world and every sentient being that inhabits it, love is the one and only answer. Perhaps we are not yet ready to make a bomb of love, a device powerful enough to entirely destroy hate, selfishness, and greed that devastate the planet. However, each individual carries within them a small but powerful generator of love whose energy is waiting to be released. When we learn to give and receive this universal energy, dear, is it Liesel?
Lisa.
We will Liesel. Yes, we will have affirmed that love conquers all, is able to transcend everything and anything, because love is the quintessence of life. I deeply regret not having been able to express what is in my heart, which has quietly beaten for you all my life. Maybe it's too late to apologize, but as time is relative, I need to tell you that I love you, and thanks to you, I have reached the ultimate answer. Your father, Albert Einstein. And how could we hear that? How could we read that and not have our soul go off like a tuning fork? Any conscious being would hear that and feel that resonance, like the sympathetic strings on a sitar that vibrate when the others do. I mean, that's who we are. And how beautiful of a message is that? That I don't care. I don't care if the claimed author was Scooby-Doo. That's on par with anything written in the Gospels, you know? And
Elton John's song Love Story. Love is the opening door. Love is what we came here for.
Mhm. Yes.
It's everywhere,
Mhm.
all around us, omnipresent,
Yes.
like God, like the glue that holds the molecules of the cosmos together. I have often described it as our superpower.
Mhm.
It is absolute truth.
Yes.
And it is an act of God, an act of love, an act. It's not a noun. It's not a person, place, or thing. It is a
Yes.
verb. It is an action word. It
Mhm.
only exists conceptually until we put it to use, until we put it to action. And then
Yes.
therefore change the world. So you can see, knowing me as well as you do, the impact that
Yeah.
that letter had on me.
Mm.
And it shouldn't matter to me who wrote the words, because truth is truth is truth. And if love is a universal power, a universal force,
Mhm.
and powerful enough to save us from ourselves and save this fragile world on which we live, then it doesn't matter
Yeah.
who penned it. It doesn't matter who the scribe was or who they ascribed the letter to,
Exactly.
because truth is absolute.
Yes.
And I believe that the words in that letter
Mhm.
are absolutely true, even if it's not an authentic letter from Albert Einstein to his daughter. And who is to say, and who could know, and what is the plausibility that whoever did write it was not channeling that mindset,
Mhm.
that need to use a vehicle or a vessel
Mhm.
to put that message out into the world? Because Einstein said, don't release my stuff until the world is ready for it.
Mhm.
And I believe that we are ready for this.
Yes.
Well, on that note, let's bring in our darling, beautiful Erin Bush. Hi, sweetheart. How are you?
Hi, Aaron.
Hi. I've been spending the last 45 minutes like texting my mom going, Okay, my brain exploded when Jeff gets talking about the things he talks about. And I'm like, what in the hell could I possibly contribute to this incredible conversation? But then it dawned on me.
Well, you're an energy healer, and this is about energy and love. And
love is a frequency.
It is.
But I know when y'all were discussing Christmas and Santa and, you know, all that, the first thing that came into my brain when talking about truth is the movie It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I think a lot of us, for truth for us, and I'm going to go on a different tangent, but we have the truth of the things we think about ourselves. We have the truth of the things that people think about us. And somewhere in the middle of that is truth, right? But I think like a movie like It's a Wonderful Life, or even Gone with the Wind. You talk about, you know, when you're talking about going through this cycle, going through this whole, you know, you kind of come back in a different door to the same location, but now your perspective has completely changed. You know, and It's a Wonderful Life, you know, you've got, why is my brain completely going to mush right now? Talking about Jimmy Stewart's character. I can remember Harry Bailey all day long. George, thank you.
George, yes.
You know, this is a man who spent his whole life doing things for other people. And most of the time, he didn't think anybody noticed. He didn't think, you know, he mattered. And Andrea and you and I had this discussion. I'm going to say out loud what I said to you in just a minute. And then, you know, obviously he meets Clarence, jumps in the water, gets a whole new perspective, comes out a brand new man. When you and I were talking before we did the show, we were talking about, you know, we were talking about canceling the shows, not being on tonight, maybe canceling them forever. I feel like I'm not making a difference. And I was like, whoa, hold up, girl. Because here's the thing. In talking about that movie and talking about what truth means, we have such a narrow scope of the effect that we have on other people, right? So I think the thing that for all of us that are healers or energy workers or whatever our thing is, that is our contribution to the world, we feel like we have to do it on this massive, monumental, worldwide level. And it's just not possible, right? That's why I don't watch the news, because I can't fix any of this chaos. But we can immediately affect the world in which we are actively involved in, our circles of friends, you know, your shows, Jeff, your books, all these different things that we all bring to the table in an attempt to give as much love as we can, but we don't see the powerful effect that those things have on other people, right? I mean, and I use myself as an example of all the things that you've brought to my life. But you and I talk all the time, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a day. But, you know, you come on, you do these shows, you go to these different events, and you have no way of connecting or knowing the effect of your messages on other people. So it's like truth can be, I agree, truth isn't absolute. But truth gets so skewed by our own perspectives a lot of the times. And I feel like especially for humans, it's hard enough to be a human, especially right now. And then, you know, we're spending all this time beating ourselves up about, I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing enough. But in reality, just our existence and the attempt to spread love and the message that we try to share, the help that we offer other people, we are also proving the fact that truth, in my mind, also equals love. Now, truth can be ugly. Hopefully, most of the time it's out of love or concern for someone that you have to give a hard truth. But at the end of the day, I always feel like love and truth, it's a vibration. It resonates differently. It hits the system differently. I mean, I know a lot of us can tell when somebody's lying to us. We can tell from across the room, you know, what's going on with somebody. They're going through a divorce, or you can kind of pick in a lineup who's going through what. But you're only seeing it through your lens, just like they're only seeing it through their lens. And in between those two things is the truth. And I just find the more we go out of our way to help others and make a difference, even if it's just in the little circle that we're in, what else can we do? We're trying to do the best we can with what we can affect. And I think that's just as much, we're still spreading as much love as we can. And then we also don't realize when you're doing those things, the ripple effect it has on other people. Whether it's watching the show, going to an event, reading a book.
It is a pebble in the pond. And,
yep.
You know, that's what, no matter how downtrodden I might feel on any given night after a very long day of caregiving, or, whatever issues I'm dealing with, I, pull up my fleece jammy bottoms and come
Your
sit in
unicorn
front of the
slippers.
computer and my unicorn slippers. And yes, actually, yes. And do it, because, I really do love our audience, and I perceive our audience as members of our extended family. Jeff, you and I have talked about that many times, that these are people that we love and care for, and it doesn't even matter if we never get to meet every single one of them in person. Chances are really good we won't.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't sever in any way the connection that we feel with each other, because when we put a broadcast like this together, and this one being particularly brutally honest, and putting a white hot spotlight on my own personal flaws and foibles to do it, because I don't perceive that to be a negative thing.
Right.
If somebody out there says, "Oh shit, she's so gullible," I'll be the first one to raise my hand and say, "Yes, you're right. I am. I always want to believe the best in everyone. I always want to give them the benefit of the doubt. I always want to believe until I'm forced to stare something in the face that's ugly. But ultimately, ugliness is beautiful too, if it's truth."
Yeah. And that's the
True.
But that is the best thing about you. Your story.
With my hair, I got nice hair.
Like, I'm talking.
Yeah.
That's not bad either. It's not bad either. But I told you this a couple weeks ago when we were talking. You mentioned Princess Peanut Buttercup, and the words just flashed through my mind: the princess and the pea, the story, the fairy tale.
She's resting comfortably.
Yeah. And it was like this download came to me to communicate to you that in that story, this princess stays overnight at the castle. I don't remember all the details, but in order to see if she was qualified to marry the prince and become the princess, she sleeps on these layers of mattresses with a single pea underneath them. And her ability to feel something so small and minute under all of these layers is what qualified her to become the princess. It was what qualified her to become who she was destined to become. And I remember saying to you, like, I really feel to tell you this, like a prophetic word. I really feel to tell you this, that it is your ability to feel, and an ability to feel goes both ways, right? You feel both ends of the polarity. You feel the good, you also feel the bad, very strong. But that ability to feel with that intensity is the thing that qualifies you to do what you do and to be who you are. Because when you feel the intensity of love, it gushes out in ways that change people's lives. It does. I mean, if you watch the chat, people are just like, I love Andrea, the love that she shows. She hugged me once at a convention. I mean, et cetera, so on. That's the kind of stuff that people are commenting, because that's who you are. So that extreme love gushes from you, but then also the extreme honesty, like you shared here tonight, the extreme vulnerability. I got to be honest with you. In my whole career as a public speaker and pastor and all that, that was a part that I tended to avoid, right? The vulnerability part was something that I tended to avoid, because you always felt like you had to keep up this image. You're a representative of the church.
That's the only way I could have done this show tonight, was to do it exactly the way that we've done it.
Exactly. And when I learned to like crack my ribcage open and let people see what's going on in here, that's where I found people actually being transformed. So the extreme, either way, that ability to feel and emote and then share it, that is absolutely life-changing for people. And for anyone listening tonight too, you can take that for yourself as well. Like, you might feel that your intense emotions are a weakness. It is not a weakness. It is a great, great strength. You have to learn how to harness that at times. Absolutely. You have to learn to not maybe slide too far one way or the other. And that comes with practice and what have you, but it is not a weakness. It is a gift. It is a gift, and it indicates probably what you're called to do and to be doing if you feel that way as well. So, anyways, that was for free.
Well, thank you. You
It's
know,
true.
Mhm.
I'm too humble to make this about me. This is about how these words transformed me to a certain extent, touched me
Yes.
deep in my soul, and touched me, not just me. That
Right.
I agree with Jeff, Erin. You know, he said this letter found me. And I mean, it's been circulating since 2015, and I saw it 3 weeks ago at a time that I really needed to see it.
Yay, universe.
Yeah. Yay,
Dropped it in your lap. Yeah.
I really needed to see it. And yes, did I invest my belief in its author? Yeah. I bought right in. I never even questioned it. Jeff is the one that took the research dive, probably on his lunch hour at work. You know, I mean, he's the one that sought out its point of origin, you know, and determining what has been determined about it, or at least what has been questioned in terms of its authenticity as an author. The more I spoke with myself about this, I said I had to ask some difficult questions, but one of them was, are the words any less powerful because they may have been written by someone else? Right. And as we said in the first hour, it is assumed, scientifically accepted, that E equals MC squared is a constant, is a truth. But is truth relative? And no, the truth is not relative. It does not shift with the wind. It does not flow like, an ebb tide. It is what it is, always, without exception.
Yes.
And
I think we live in a society where it's hard to live a true life. Like, and I think we're always, and I always think of the phrase, and I don't remember which book it was of yours, where you're talking about stop being a salmon in your own life, like flip on your back and float. And I always have taken that in my personal journey to realize that up until the last couple of years, I wasn't living my own personal truth. I was living up to the expectations that other people had set for me. Mm-hmm. Right. So when I finally started to, work on myself and work out some of the issues I've had from, over the years, and started learning that it was okay for me to just be me as I am, not because somebody expects me to be a certain way or somebody says this about me or whatever, my life completely changed. Mm-hmm. And that even started before I met you. I mean, I had done a lot of work already before you came into my life. Meeting me
was a result of what work had already begun.
That's exactly right. So it's like when you start living your truth, and I know some people hate the phrase authentic life, which I get because that gets tossed around in spirituality all the time. But if you finally start identifying and understanding that you are perfectly perfect as you are in this moment right now, regardless of what's happening in your life, regardless of what situations you're in, you are perfectly perfect just as you are. But we don't live in a society that supports that theory. It's, oh, you got to look like this, dress like that, drive this car, have this job. And it's like we somewhere along the way as very young children learned that it was not okay to be who we were in the beginning.
Right. We bought into the book.
Yeah, there's a book called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And she had a phrase, and this really is more for women, but I think you can apply it across the board. Get back to remembering who you were before the world got its hands on you.
Yeah.
And I think at this point, when you decide to be who you are, then and being learning to be comfortable in that, even if it takes some time and it takes some effort and it takes some work, your life turns around completely. Like you're vibrating at a different level. You're vibrating at a frequency that matches what you've always like the frequency you always should have been at, if that makes sense to me. So then life just seems to get easier. I'm not saying it's not without its hardships. We're still human, but the universe rewards you for living your life as you're supposed to live it, how you feel you're supposed to live it. And I firmly believe that. I think I'm a pretty good example of that, given what my life has looked like in the last couple of years. And for me, it's always been, when I jumped into this field or fell into it, whatever you want to call it, my only goal has always been, I'm a helper. I've always been that way. I come from, my parents are helpers. My goal in getting in this field was, who can I help? Where can I fill a need? Because that's my true self. I'm a helper. That's just what I do. I can't stand by and watch things happen and not help. So once I started realizing that prior to learning the spiritual side of things, I was helping others only from the standpoint that I needed to validate my own existence, if that makes sense. Yeah. Right? So really, it was still a selfish way of helping. But in doing all this
it's not the definition of altruism. If
exactly.
you're doing it if helping is really the outcome.
It's about you.
You, right.
Yep. And then so beginning to learn more about myself and you know, what I do have to offer the world. And I got out of law, which was massively helpful. Then I started saying, okay, I have the chance here to live being a helper the way I want to do it, not the way somebody's always told me that I have to. And I think because I started doing that, my whole life turned on its head in all the best ways. All these opportunities have opened up. You know, I've made all these amazing friends, and
you live your authentic life now. You do.
Oh yeah.
And I know it would be frankly, my dear, it would be too hard for me to try to keep up with the a deception, a fraud. It is so much easier to be blatantly honest. Be kind, be gentle, be good, but be blatantly honest. You know, none of us are an alabaster statue. We may appear as such when we're in our most stoic mindset and mode, you know, appear as, you know, a pillar of strength.
Yeah.
Each and every one of us, in my opinion, is a clump of clay. Our mistake, upon realizing how malleable we are, our mistake is to let the world shape and form us when what we really need to do is sculpt ourselves into the vessel that we wish to become. And for me, I like to use and Jeff's so good with these metaphors, but I like to think of myself as a lighthouse on the coast, helping the ships not crash into the rocks. Be that beacon of light that tells them where the land is, what's the safe route, and pull on into the harbor here. Now, and that's just one of my favorite images, you know, like on Buttercup. I did not come to teach you. I came to love you. Love will teach you. I've left that up there for years now. I can't think of a more important message to hit people with as soon as they go to that page, as soon as they hop into our circle, you know, and say, ooh, this looks like a comfy, cushy, warm, snuggly place in cyberspace to land that would be safe, where I can express myself and no one will judge me. They will just love me. You know, there's not a lot of space out there. Certainly
not on the internet.
Not on the interwebs.
Not on the interwebs. Nope.
You know, but that is one. And, you know, when messages come up on the bottom of the show and I see the names, I'm like, Buttercup. There's another Buttercup. There's another Buttercup. Oh, I see a Buttercup. You know, it's so great that, and like I said, I might never meet these people in person, but I love them nonetheless.
You know, if it means anything, if the phrase we were made in the image of God means anything, it means this. What is God? God is love. So if you're made in the image of God, you're made in the image of love. Therefore, who you were before the world got its hands on you was love.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's who you are. That's the innocence in which you are born. And that is tested, right?
Every day.
And all of the world attempts to brutalize us via brutality and take that innocence from us. And we lose it over time. I know I lost it over time, right? I mean, even
I did too.
I lost it when I lost.
Cynical.
You get cynical. You get hardened. Yep. You get enough criticism from people. You get enough backlash. Eventually, you just want to, like, flip them the bird and go live in a cabin somewhere. I mean, I've been tempted on more than one occasion to do something similar.
I kind of want to do that anyway.
And I do too.
Just go live in the woods somewhere.
Minus the bitterness.
To an airport. Oh yeah.
Minus the bitterness. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. For sure.
But like all of life is trying to take that spark and that fire from us. And it's the Hegelian dialectic of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. The thesis is that which it's that original image we're created in of love. It's innocent. It's untested.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I don't want to say unearned, but it's just bequeathed to us. It's just who we are. But then it's tested. Then we experience the antithesis. Everything that grates against that which we truly are. And boy, we're tempted to lose it. And then eventually, and this is kind of going back to even what we talked about in the first hour about the first naivete and the second naivete, and the joining of the two. I think real spiritual maturity is identifying yourself as love. That's who I am. That's what I came here to do. I've experienced the antithesis. I've experienced the antithetical in every way, shape, or form that I can experience relative to my experience. And I still choose to love. Somehow, some way, there's synthesis there. There's thesis, antithesis, and then there is synthesis. And that is that second naivete. When you see the darkness, you see the depravity, you see what people are capable of that you didn't think were capable of such things. And everything in you wants to just flip the world the bird and retreat into your room and
And never look
drown your sorrows in vodka and anything else you can get your hands on, and just, you know what I mean? Like, but it's facing that darkness and those demons, and still, there's this amazing practice amongst certain in a certain form of Buddhism, and I won't go into it too much, where the way that demons are thought to be exorcised is not by driving them out of a place or a person, but by actually leaving out gifts to draw them in, and then befriending them and converting them. Right? Yeah. And converting the darkness into light, and then freeing them.
Yes.
And that's how we are transformed. Like, it's like all that darkness is drawn to us and us to it. And in that moment, there's that choice we can make. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling a bit here, and I apologize if I am, but I think that's what spiritual maturity is. It's facing that darkness. It's facing those demons, and not only out here, but seeing them out there, also being able to see them in here. Because every time I see darkness out there, it just shows me that it's also here. And then I learn to even love the part of myself that I see reflected out there, and become a more whole being. And I think that's really, it's what this is all about, man. It's really,
we live in a world of degradation and deprivation and desperation.
Yes.
We live in a world where unfathomable horrors occur. And, as we say these words, horrific things are happening to people all over this planet. And yet we also live in a world where human creativity gives us, I can't tell you how many people have read my trilogy and said that they were inspired by the strength and the fortitude and the love that bound our family together and got us through something that was extreme. And the haunting extreme only because we didn't understand it. It was the unknown. But I look at, like, as you were speaking, I was thinking of one of my favorite stage plays, just brilliant. The whole concept of it, Don Quixote, the Man of La Mancha. To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe. The words, every time I hear it, my heart, as he sings this song to Dulcinea, who he perceives to be the most glorious, most beautiful woman in the world. That's how he sees Dulcinea. And his message to the world is that you can overcome anything and be everything and be the light in the world. And he saw her and the world around him with childlike wonder.
Yeah.
And that there are 1,000, a million things that can inspire any one of us at any given moment. And they speak truth to power.
Yes.
They speak truth into the universe. They speak absolute truth to our soul, to that part of us that is that generator of love, that if we don't let it be beaten down and broken down like your old dryer, we can close our eyes and let the universe tell us how to fix that part of us that has been defeated in the moment, like I felt yesterday, defeated, utterly discouraged beyond redemption, beyond reconciliation, like literally just, I felt completely beaten down. Like, why can't I just believe one thing and have it be true so that I can put it out into the world with confidence that I'm doing something good to expand human consciousness, to put people in touch with their own emotional core, to let them feel embraced from afar through a computer screen by people who genuinely care about their well-being and their spiritual growth and their ascension and their enlightenment, their awakening, their quantum leap into this paradigm shift that is occurring. And I believe to the center of my being that this letter plays a part in that, some way, somehow, shunning all disappointment. There's nothing to be disappointed about here. Nothing.
And isn't that the lesson? That's the. Go ahead, Aaron. I was just.
Oh no, you're fine. Go ahead. I come in after you.
I was just going to say, I think that's the parable in the whole thing. That's the macrocosm we experienced in the microcosm of that. It's like, I don't want to say naive in a negative way, but a sort of just an exuberant willingness to embrace truth, facing down what seems like contradiction, and then synthesizing the two and realize they can both exist together, and it's actually more true because it exists in tension than it would be if it existed like that. Exactly. Because while truth might not be relative, the vehicle through which truth is transmitted most certainly is. And that's the reason I read that passage from the Gita where it says, whatever form is necessary in whatever age, I take it. I have provided forms in every age for me to manifest myself in and through in order for this truth or that truth to be communicated. And even in the dryer story, that was my point. It was like some guy on the street who had no mechanical acumen could have told me, well, I think the problem might have been this, and I wouldn't have listened to him. But in the dream, that knowledge took the form of somebody whom I trusted to communicate the truth to me. And so it landed, and I was able to fix my dryer. For you in that instant, that truth that needed to land and make that unconscious thing conscious, that was transformative, something that was real and had always been in you, but reading it in that way made it visible and tangible. That truth took the form of this avatar, and so it got past all the biases, and it transformed. And that's so truth isn't relative, as Augustine said. All truth is God's truth. So truth is truth is truth is truth, but the vehicles through which truth comes to us, those things are relative. As the letter itself says, time being relative, I may not have told you this when I should have, but I'll tell you it now in the hopes that it'll somehow traverse time and read and change the timeline somehow, you know. So the truth is the truth is the truth is the truth, but how it comes to us is relative. And so it will come to us in all sorts of ways. For me, for me, the whole world now is the scripture to me. I hear God as much in the birds that wake me up in the morning, or the sound of my kids fighting in the middle of the night, or whatever, as I do in any sacred text. It's like it's just all aflame with the beauty of divinity. Now everything is scripture. Everything is sacred. Everything is just resonating with that sacred hum when you realize it's just all a divine choir singing the truth of truths, you know. And so it's going to come to us in a lot of different ways. And I think that's the parable even tonight, is that there is a naive way of approaching truth. And I don't mean that in an insulting way, but an untested way of experiencing truth. And it's just this blissfully ignorant, you know. I often say to people, you know, you want to escape childhood when you're a child because you're just desperate to grow up, because you don't realize what you have, man, you know. And so you want to escape it.
It's like Billy Madison. Stay here for as long as you can, you know. You know.
Such a great movie, by the way. But you want to get out of it so bad, and then you hit like 20 or something, and you're like, dude, I would do anything to get it again. You know, I'd do anything to just, or 40 when you got to get up in the morning, you're like, I would do anything to just be able to, you know, play hooky like my kids did this last week and stay home, or have a snow day and be able to stay home. Like then you miss it. And then you want to go back to it. And then there's somehow this magical, when we reach a certain point in adulthood, whether it's through our own children or just through even just another way of whatever, there's plenty of ways to do it, where we were able to recapture in adulthood what we had in childhood, but what we didn't realize we had. And I think that's archetypally what's meant by being born again, you know, or I think that's what that means. It's experiencing consciously what we experienced once unconsciously, but now it's been tested. And so now it's no longer naive. You face it with complexity in the same way that we face the truth of this letter now via, you know, or in the context of complexity. The truth of it's been tested, right?
Right.
But the truth remains because truth is not relative, but the vehicle through which it comes is. And part of spiritual maturity and growth is being able to accept that tension. That truth is truth, regardless of how it comes to you. And it might come to you through hardship in life. It might come to you through extremely difficult circumstances. The last year of my life was one of the most difficult years I've ever had in my 41 years, right? And I'm sorry, my 25 years. I apologize. I skipped ahead a few there. But no, in my 40, it was probably the most difficult year I've had. I have grown in ways I couldn't even possibly have imagined growing 365 days ago. This year was my teacher, even though at the beginning I thought it was going to be my murderer. It ended up being my mentor and my teacher. And so part of it is, you know, I approached it with this naivety, and it smacked me in the face and curb stomped me a few times. And I was like, oh, and then I realized it's actually breaking some stuff off of me that needed to be broken off, you know? And actually, I remember my friend up in, when I was a kid, he got attacked by yellow jackets. We were out in the woods kicking down dead trees, and he kicked down a dead tree that had a yellow jacket's nest in it, and they swarmed around him and I didn't know what was going on. All of a sudden, he just started screaming and slapping himself, and I thought he'd lost his mind, you know? It's like, the boy's gone mad, and he ran home, and he ran into his house, and I kind of followed him like, hey, man, what's going on? And all of a sudden, I hear his dad screaming and slapping him, and he's screaming, and I'm like, what is happening? It's like, I had no clue what was going on. It just sounded to me like his dad was beating the hell out of him, and he lost his mind. And I'm like, I'm going to go home. Turns out, obviously, he'd been attacked by yellow jackets. He runs in the house. His dad sees it. His dad's saving him. From my perspective, it looked like he was being, you know, abused when he was being saved, you know?
Right.
And in the same way, at the beginning of last year, I thought it was the death of me, and it was actually the birth of me. Things were being broken off of me that couldn't have been broken off any other way. And synthesizing the thesis and the antithesis, man, I think that's in some way the parable of tonight, or at least it's the parable that I'm hearing and that I'm internalizing tonight. And I hope that's being communicated. Aaron, you have the floor. I'm sorry for talking so long.
No, listen, man. I've said this a million times. I could sit and listen to you talk all night long. I would have been just as fine standing in the green room all night and learning. But to tie into exactly what you're saying, my favorite quote of all time, and probably my next tattoo, is a Victor Hugo quote, and it's on a giant pad on my desk, and it says, "What makes night within us may leave stars." And you talk about, your last year. I mean, a lot of us had issues last year. I was very fortunate that my 2023 was lucky, but I've had a lot of years that were terrible. But when I read that quote, that's the first quote that actually made me cry. And I think that's so true. What makes night within us may leave stars. Basically, all the struggles, all the chaos, all the stress, whatever it is, if you decide, to Jeff's point, to face that head on, right? We call it shadow work for a reason. You have to make peace with those darker sides of yourself that allowed you to survive and get through those terrible, horrible things. And then what's left when the dust settles is this beautifully transformed person, hopefully, in theory. But again, that goes back to perspective. Tough times suck, no doubt about it. But we don't get to skate through life completely unscathed and have the perspective that we have now, right? Like, we've all been through some serious shit. We've all had a lot of struggles, but we've made the decision to make ourselves better from those things. A lot of times people ask me, I had a very abusive first marriage. Do you regret that? No. I regret that I let it happen because I own my part in it, but I wouldn't be who I am today with the empathy that I have and the care and concern for others if I hadn't gone through that. So we could spend our whole lives concerned about, past and terrible things that happened to us. Or you can say, okay, listen, all right, this is a thing that happened to me. How can I make this something that empowers me and can also help empower others? But you cannot do that if you're not living your truth.
And if you are not living in a vulnerable way where you are receptive to and willing to give equally emotionally with every encounter, with every person that comes into your sphere. I have often said, I would rather be fooled once than to change the way I approach people. And, I have every now and then somebody, okay, Bill just put up 5 minutes. Did Bill on my phone, it says that Amazon delivered your new like subatomic particle clock that I had. And the way the clock works.
Everybody's in chat saying, "Shh, don't tell Bill we have 5 minutes left. Tell Bill to hide the clock." Like it's a whole thing.
All right. The way the new clock works that it says has been delivered. I have your address. The way it works is it's 11 o'clock when I say it's 11 o'clock. That's how it works, because it only works when I am queen of high strangeness in the alternate universe. So, make a note of it, dude. Oh, all right. Okay. So, look at all these wonderful people that are, my phone is, I love you, sweetheart.
I love it comes on like,
Bill, did I tell you this was not going to be the show you anticipated?
It was amazing. The comments in chat, this show, I mean, always, it has that gravitation to it and how everybody comes together. I mean, we're adding more family members in here. I'm telling you, this is amazing what's going on in chat. And I know that you watch the show to see the chats afterwards, don't you?
I do.
Yeah.
So she knows everyone when you're making your comments. It is amazing. And I got to say, this was one of my favorite shows. It was so powerful, intense. I can't thank all of you enough on behalf of chat and those listening and the viewers, everyone else, this was awesome tonight. I just wanted to come on and say that.
This was
And
necessary.
you now have 3 minutes.
I know. We now have 3 minutes.
I'm out of here.
Stay on screen, Bill. You can just stay with us, darling. No, he likes to be the elusive man behind the curtain. Yeah, this was I said to you last night, Jeff, or this morning, I said, I hope that when 11 o'clock rolls around, that I am re-inspired, reignited, enlightened, illuminated, and that I feel hopeful and uplifted, and in a way belligerently staring what I originally perceived as very bad news right in the face and say, you goddamn big black cloud, I am going to find the silver lining, because excuse me, coffee,
More
nectar
coffee.
of
She's probably on cup number 7 for the day, if I had to guess.
no, it's no, it's not. It's I it's probably COVID. I mean, who knows? Who
Again, for like the 36th
Yeah,
time, you've got
for the
COVID again.
36th time.
Yeah, whatever.
I'm
It's fine.
No, it's just talking for 2 hours with a dry throat because we keep the temperature in the house through the roof to keep my mom warm. But anyway, I want to thank you both with all my heart for being a part of this, and for everybody, for Linny and Jeff who are monitoring the chat, everybody that is in there, everybody who this might resonate with. Please share it with someone that you think might need the message contained, like a message in a bottle that the universe dropped in my lap in a bizarre way. And have the courage to confront that which makes you uncomfortable, that which disappoints you, that which disillusions you. Have the courage to say, no, wait a minute. There's a larger message here. And here it is. And we shared it with you, Jeff. I love you with all my heart. Erin, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And for all of those who are watching, remember to be the change that you wish to see in the world. And always, always be the light you seek. Good night.